And yet Trump and his MAGA supporters not only embrace political violence, but they laugh about it. At his rally, he jokes about an intruder, whipped up by the big Trump lie, taking a hammer to Paul Pelosi's skull and echoing the very same words used on January 6th. Where's Nancy? And he thinks that's funny. He laughed about it. What a sick... My God. I think it's despicable, seriously. Not just for a president, for any person to say that. But to say it to the whole world listening. When I was overseas, anyway. Trump's assault on democracy isn't just part of his past. It's what he's promising for the future. He's being straightforward. He's not hiding the ball. His first rally for the 2024 campaign opened with a choir of January 6th insurrectionists singing from prison on a cell phone, while images of the January 6th riot played on a big screen behind him at his rally. Can you believe that? This is like something out of a fairy tale, a bad fairy tale. Trump began his 2024 campaign by glorifying the failed violent insurrection on our Capitol. The guy who claims law and order sows lawlessness and disorder. Trump's not concerned about your future, I promise you. Trump is now promising a full-scale campaign of revenge and retribution, his words, for some years to come. They were his words, not mine. He went on to say he'd be a dictator on day one. I mean, if I were writing a book of fiction, and I said an American president said that, and not in jest. He called in, I quote, the termination, quote, this is a quote, the termination of all the rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the U.S. Constitution, should be terminated if it fits his will. It's really kind of hard to believe. Even found in the Constitution, he could terminate? He's threatened the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff with the death penalty. Says he should be put to death because the chairman put his oath to the Constitution ahead of his personal loyalty to Trump. This is coming from a president who called, when he visited cemeteries, called dead soldiers suckers and losers. Remember that? Sometimes I'm really happy the Irish in me can't be seen. It was right around the time I was at Bo's grave, Tommy. How dare he? Who in God's name does he think he is? With former aides, Trump plans to invoke the Insurrection Act, which will allow him to deploy, which is not allowed to do in ordinary circumstances, allow him to deploy U.S. military forces on the streets of America. He said it. He calls those who oppose him vermin. He talks about the blood of America as being poisoned, echoing the same exact language used in Nazi Germany. He proudly posts on social media the words that best describe his 2024 campaign, quote, revenge, quote, power, and quote, dictatorship. There's no confusion about who Trump is, what he intends to do. I placed my hand on our family Bible, and I swore an oath on the very same steps of the Capitol, just 14 days after the attack on January the 6th. As I looked out over the capital city, whose streets were lined with National Guard to prevent another attack, I saw an American that have been pushed to the brink, America that has been pushed to the brink. But I felt enormous pride, not in winning, I felt enormous pride in America, because American democracy had been tested. American democracy had held together. And when Trump had seen weakness in our democracy and continued to talk about it, I saw strength, your strength. It's not hyperbole, your strength, your integrity, American strength and integrity. Ordinary citizens, state election officials, the American judicial system had put the Constitution first, and sometimes at their peril, at their peril. Because of them, because of you, the will of the people prevailed. Not the anger of the mob or the appetites of one man. An extreme movement of America, the MAGA Republicans, led by a defeated president, is trying to steal history now. They tried to steal an election, now they're trying to steal history, telling us that violent mob was, and I quote, a peaceful protest. That insurrection, those insurrectionists were, these are his words, patriots. That there was, quote, a lot of love that day. In fact, the rest of the nation and the world saw a lot of hate and violence. For hours, the defeated former president sat in the private dining room off of the Oval Office and did nothing, absolutely nothing. His actions were among the worst derelictions of duty by any president in American history. An attempt to overturn a free and fair election by force and violence. Let me say what others cannot. We must reject political violence in America. Always, not sometimes, always. It's never appropriate. The violence of January 6th was an extension of an old playbook from the threats and violence and intimidation. In Atlanta, Georgia, two brave black women, mother and daughter, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, they had their lives upended just doing their jobs. Menacing calls, death threats, forcing them to literally flee their homes. Those pushing the big lie have a conspiracy theory among conspiracy theories that outweighs them all. That there's what, but here's the fact. There's where we don't have facts. Their whole theory has no facts, has no proof, has no evidence. That's why time and again they lost in every court of law that challenged the results. 60 losses in courts of America. There's one thing they don't have. They don't have respect for the 81 million people who voted the other way, voted for my candidacy, and voted to end the presidency. In their world, these Americans, including you, don't count. But that's not the real world. That's not democracy. That's not America. In America, we all count. In America, we witness to serve all those who, in fact, participate. And losers are taught to concede when they lose. And he's a loser. And now, my predecessors like to say, America is a failing nation. In my face, bless me, Father, for his sin. I mean, come on. A failing nation. And by the way, did you hear he wants to see the stock market crash? Because he does not want it now. We're doing well. He acknowledging by that we're doing pretty damn well economically and getting better. He wants to see the stock market crash. You know why? He doesn't want to be the next Herbert Hoover. As I told him, he's already Hoover. He's the only president to be president for 4 years and lose jobs, not gain any jobs. Come on, man. You know, some of the things he said, well, I don't get started. But look, frankly, to put it very politely, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Republicans in Congress voted against our infrastructure law. We got enough to make it work of 30-something. The vast majority voted against it. They all voted against all the other bills that I have. I mean, 100% voted against. And guess what? Whether it's Marjorie Taylor Greene or whoever, now when these new projects come, they're welcoming them to their state. They voted against it all. So I told them I'll be there for the groundbreaking with them. How many of you believe the tax system's fair? Raise your hand. And even those of you doing well. We made progress making sure the biggest corporations pay their fair share by paying a minimum 15%, just 15%. That paid for all the programs I'm talking about so far. And we did that, and we still cut the deficit $7 billion. But guess what? Trump passed last time out a $2 trillion tax cut, overwhelmingly benefited the very wealthy and big corporations that expanded the federal debt significantly. And now, instead of protecting Social Security and Medicare like I am, Trump and his MAGA friends want to give another multi-billion-dollar tax cut to the super wealthy and the biggest corporations. Look, I'm not anti-wealthy. I'm not anti-corporation. I come from the corporate state of the world. Seriously, more corporations are incorporated in my state, as you know, Gov, than every other state in the nation combined. But they got to pay their fair share. I'm serious. Think about it. Look, folks, before the pandemic, there were 750, or maybe roughly 750 billionaires in America. Now there are 1,000. You know what their average tax rate they pay, the federal tax rate? 8.2%. Anybody wouldn't change that for that tax rate? Yeah. Well, let me tell you something. If, in fact, they paid their fair share, over the next 10 years, there'd be $400 billion in new income coming in. We could take care of all these problems. We could have daycare for all kids. We could increase economic growth even more, et cetera. But Trump and his MAGA friends are determined to take away that opportunity. But if you re-elect me, I tell you what, man, hang on taxes. And I promise, not anybody making less than $400,000 would have 1 penny in federal taxes raised. I kept that promise in the beginning. I haven't made it, and I will not break it again. And look, folks, I inherited an economy that was on the brink. But since I took office, we've created 15 million new jobs in just 3 years. That's a record in American history. 800 new manufacturing jobs. They said, where's it written that we can't be the manufacturing capital of the world? Unemployment at a 50-year low. So far, and under Donald Trump, black and Latino unemployment skyrocketed. Under my administration, we have record low black and Latino unemployment. Donald Trump, Asian American unemployment nearly doubled. Now the employment rate of Asian Americans is the highest it's been since 2008. Look, we cut black child poverty in half, cut Latino poverty by records as well. We're seeing the fastest rate of new Latino businesses all over this decade. And the next 30 years, it's going to even be bigger. Look, folks, more people have health insurance than ever before. The racial wealth gap is as small as it's been in 20 years. Wages are back up. Inflation is coming down. Inflation has dropped from 9 to 3%. We've already accomplished a lot. So now let's talk about the future we can build together. Here in Scranton, I grew up understanding we have many obligations as a country. But we only have, and I got in trouble for saying this from the time I was a young senator, we only have one truly sacred obligation. And that's to equip those we send to war and take care of them and their families when they come home or if they don't come home. I don't want to lose my temper in this, but I think about the statue in town now that I'm Commander-in-Chief. And I had them double-check my memory is correct that Uncle Bosie Ambrose J. Finnegan's name is etched on that statue. And I have to say, there are a lot of things that Donald Trump has said and done that I find extremely offensive. But one that offends me the most is when he refused as president to visit an American cemetery outside of Paris when he was president. Why? He said that those soldiers who gave their lives were, quote, was his quote, suckers and losers. Suckers and losers, he said it. Who the hell does he think he is? Who does he think he is? These were heroes. These soldiers are heroes, just as every American who served this nation. Believing otherwise, that alone is disqualifying for someone to seek this office. Thank God I wasn't standing next to him. It's not a joke. It's not a campaign line. The God truth is you're the best workers in the world. That's a fact. You're the best workers in the world. When I went out to South Korea to get them to start to build back those computer chips here in America, I said, why are you will? And they decided to do it, investing billions of dollars. I said, why are you doing it? He said, two things. You have the best workers in the world, and you have the safest place in the world to do it. Well, folks, when I think climate, I think jobs. I think union jobs, good-paying jobs that don't require a college degree. You've attracted nearly $700 billion in private sector investment, in advanced manufacturing, in semiconductors, clean energy, and so much more here in America, creating tens of thousands of good-paying jobs, building trade jobs. In fact, construction of new factories has more than doubled in our administration. Meanwhile, Donald Trump still thinks windmills cause cancer. That's what he said. By the way, remember when he was trying to deal with COVID, he said, just inject a little bleach in your veins. He missed it, all went to his hair. Look, I shouldn't have said that. Probably shouldn't have said that. True. You guys are a bad influence on me. Trump and his MAGA allies want to repeal the most significant investments in climate ever. The work that you risk your lives doing lots of it. You know, and he wants to risk all those jobs. Are you surprised? I'm not. A lot of you don't know that if you want to be a pipe fitter, a lot of people don't know. If you want to be a pipe fitter, electrician, or any other trades here, it takes 4 or 5 years of hard work as an apprentice. Most people think you can walk up, and you guys should talk more about this. They think you walk up and you say, I want to be an electrician, you get a license. It's 4 or 5 years. It's like going back to college. It's going like getting a college degree. And that's the reason you're the best is because you're the best trained in the world. You get it, I get it. But Donald Trump has no clue. He undermined union apprenticeships by lowering standards and lowering pay. I ended his anti-work policies and saved the building trades apprenticeships program because they're the gold standard of the world. They are. They actually are. If you think your Irish grandparents are wondering, my great-great-grandparents that came here in 1846 and went, what in the hell's going on? I want to thank you for the warm welcome, but please, not so loud. Donald was listening. Sleepy Don. I kind of like that. I may use that again. Kelly O'Donnell, President of the White House Correspondents Association, thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir.
But Kelly O, let's be honest, you're way too young to be president. It's been a year since I delivered this speech, and my wife Jill, who's with me tonight, was worried how I do. I told her, don't worry, just like riding a bike. She said, that's what I'm worried about. Of course, the 2024 election is in full swing. And yes, age is an issue. I'm a grown man running against a 6-year-old. Well, I feel great. I really feel great. I'm campaigning all over the country. Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina. I've always done well in the original 13 colonies. And speaking of history, did you hear what Donald just said about the major Civil War battle? Quote, Gettysburg, wow. Trump's speech was so embarrassing, the statue of Robert E. Lee surrendered again. But look, age is the only thing we have in common. My vice president actually endorses me. I had a great stretch since the State of the Union. Well, Donald has had a few tough days lately. You might call it stormy weather. What the hell? Trump's so desperate he started reading those Bibles he's selling. Then he got to the first commandment. You shall have no other gods before me. That's when he put it down and said, this book's not for me. Signed the most significant gun safety law in nearly 30 years, which matters. As I've mourned with you in Atlanta, Monterey Park, and Half Moon Bay, been there to meet the families. Together we won't stop until we finally ban assault weapons as well. I could go on, but look, the point here is we're lowering costs, expanding opportunities, and protecting freedoms. That's in stark contrast to my predecessor's view of America and his view of all of you. We'll never forget him lying about the pandemic. We'll never forget the rise of anti-Asian hate crimes during the pandemic. I'm proud to have had to, I'm proud to have had to, but I'm proud to have signed this COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act with your support. We've also provided historic value and funding for public safety in local communities that's bringing its results. We're seeing a 50-year low in violent crime in America. San Francisco, for example, anti-Asian hate crimes are down 75% over the last 2 years. When Trump was in office, he enacted a $2 trillion tax cut, overwhelmingly benefiting the super wealthy and the very biggest corporations that exploded the federal debt. His administration added more to the federal debt than any previous presidential term in American history. And now he and his congressional Republican friends want to do it again. At the same time, he wants to, quote, I love his terminology, terminate the Affordable Care Act, kicking millions of you and your families off of insurance and taking away protections for pre-existing conditions, affecting millions of people. On Social Security and Medicare, my predecessor says, quote, there's a lot we can do in terms of cutting. Not on our watch.
Not on our watch.
Not on our watch. And he brags about cutting Roe v. Wade, making sure it's overturned. But Kamala and I are going to keep fighting to restore Roe v. Wade until it's the law of the land again. Literally snapped in the sky. No, I'm serious. That's why January 6th happened, when he unleashed an insurrection. Now he's running again, and he's clearly unhinged. He calls insurrectionists who stormed the Capitol patriots. Patriots. If reelected, he wants to pardon, quote, every one of them. Let me ask you, what do you think he would have done on January 6th if black Americans had stormed it? Think about this. What do you think would have happened if black Americans had stormed the Capitol? I don't think he'd be talking about pardons. It's the same guy who wanted to tear gas you as you peacefully protested George Floyd's murder. The same guy who still calls the Central Park Five guilty, even though they were exonerated. He's that landlord who denies housing applications because of the color of your skin. He's that guy who won't say Black Lives Matter and invokes neo-Nazi Third Reich terms. We all remember Trump is the same guy who unleashed birthism, the birthism lie against Barack. And then Trump tells you he's the greatest president. I love this one. He says he's the greatest president for black people in the history of America, including more than Abraham Lincoln. I mean, can you fathom that? Where in the hell? Like I said, I think he injected too much of that bleach in his brain. I think it affected his brain. Some lies are so foolish they don't have to say anything about them at all. Maya Angelou said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. You got it, kid. You got it. I'm showing you who I am, and Trump has shown you who he is. And today, Donald Trump is pandering and peddling lies and stereotypes for your vote so he can win for himself, not for you. Well, Donald Trump will have a message for you. Not in our house and not in our watch.
Thank you. President Trump?
We have the greatest economy in the history of our country. We have never done so well. Everybody was amazed by it. Other countries were copying us. We got hit with COVID, and when we did, we spent the money necessary so we wouldn't end up in a Great Depression, the likes of which we had in 1929. By the time we finished, so we did a great job. We got a lot of credit for the economy, a lot of credit for the military, and no wars, and so many other things. Everything was rocking good. But the thing we never got the credit for, and we should have, is getting us out of that COVID mess. He created mandates that was a disaster for our country. But other than that, we had given them back a country where the stock market actually was higher than pre-COVID, and nobody thought that was even possible. The only jobs he created are for illegal immigrants and bounce-back jobs, a bounce-back from the COVID. He has not done a good job. He's done a poor job, and inflation's killing our country. It is absolutely killing us.
Thank you. President Biden?
Well, look, the greatest economy in the world, he's the only one who thinks that, I think. I don't know anybody else who thinks he had the greatest economy in the world. And, you know, the fact of the matter is that we find ourselves in a situation where his economy, he rewarded the wealthy. He had the largest tax cut in American history, $2 trillion. He raised a deficit larger than any president has in any one term. He's the only president other than Herbert Hoover who's lost more jobs than he had when he began, since Herbert Hoover. The idea that he did something that was significant. And the military, you know, when he was president, they were still killing people in Afghanistan. He didn't do anything about that. When he was president, we were still finding ourselves in a position where you had a notion that we were this safe country. The truth is, I'm the only president this century that doesn't have any, this decade, that doesn't have any troops dying anywhere in the world like he did. I don't know where the hell he's been. The idea that anything he said is true. I've passed the most extensive climate change legislation in history. We find ourselves, and by the way, black colleges, I came up with $15 billion for HBCUs, historic black universities and colleges, because they don't have the kind of contributors that they have to build these laboratories and the like. Any black student is capable in college of doing any white student can do. They just don't have the money, but now they'll be able to get those jobs in high tech. We're in a situation where the idea that he is claiming to have done something that had the cleanest water, he hadn't done a damn thing for the environment. He pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. I immediately joined it because if we reach 1.5 degrees Celsius at any one point, there's no way back. The only existential threat to humanity is climate change, and he didn't do a damn thing about it. He wants to undo all that I've done.
Just going back to Ukraine for 1 second. We have an ocean separating us. The European nations together have spent $100 billion, or maybe more than that, less than us. Why doesn't he call them and say, you got to put up your money like I did with NATO? I got them to put up hundreds of billions of dollars. The Secretary General of NATO said Trump did the most incredible job I've ever seen. They wouldn't have any, they were going out of business. We were spending almost 100% of the money was paid by us. He didn't do that. He's getting all, you got to ask these people to put up the money. We're over $100 billion more spent, and it has a bigger impact on them because of location, because we have an ocean in between. You got to ask them. As far as Israel and Hamas, Israel's the one that wants to go. He said the only one that wants to keep going is Hamas. Actually, Israel is the one, and you should let him go and let him finish the job. He doesn't want to do it. He's become like a Palestinian, but they don't like him because he's a very bad Palestinian. He's a weak one.
President Biden, you have a minute.
I've never heard so much foolishness. This is a guy who wants to get out of NATO. Are you going to stay in NATO? He's going to pull out of NATO. The idea that we have our strength lies in our alliances as well. It may be a big ocean, but we're ever able to avoid a war in Europe, a major war in Europe? What happens if, in fact, you have Putin continue to go into NATO? We have an Article 5 agreement. Attack on one is attack on all. You want to start the nuclear war he keeps talking about, go ahead. Let Putin go in and control Ukraine and then move on to Poland and other places. You see what happens then. He has no idea what the hell he's talking about. And by the way, I got 50 other nations around the world to support Ukraine, including Japan and South Korea, because they understand that this kind of dislocation has a serious threat to the whole world peace. No major war in Europe has ever been able to be contained just to Europe.
President.
Do this. Last month, Jill and I traveled to Normandy, France to commemorate the 80th anniversary of D-Day. We met with American veterans, some of them about 12 or 14, over 102 years old. Veterans who we toured the battlegrounds, went to the cemeteries, and looked at what was happening. There should be no question about it. All those who served as members of the military were heroes, genuine heroes, heroes for freedom, democracy, and America. Look, now, decades later, we have to look at ourselves and ask the question, will we stand for freedom again? We stand for democracy. Will we stand together as Americans? I believe we will and we can. And by the way, you know, I was in that World War I cemetery in France. And the one that one of our colleagues, the former president, didn't want to go and be up there. I probably shouldn't even say it. Anyway. We got to just remember who the hell we are. We're the United States of America. Whoa. Folks, did you have a good 4th of July? By the way, if you wonder whether Trump has it all together, did you ever hear how he explained the 4th of July when he was president? No, I'm serious. This is true. His explanation how America won the Revolutionary War, I'm not making this up. He said in his 4th of July speech 5 years ago, he said, George Washington's army won the revolution by taking control of the airports from the British. We talk about me misspeaking. Airports from the British in 1776. It's true, he is a stable genius, this man. My friends, I'm in Wisconsin for one reason, because we're going to win Wisconsin today. We're going to win it. And let me tell you how we're going to do it. You know the reason. We're going to do it because of you all in this room to start with. Well, we're going to stand up for women in America. We're going to restore Roe v. Wade, the law of the land. We're going to stand up for the right to vote again. We're going to fight for Medicare and Social Security and child care, elder care, paid leave, all which grows economies. We're going to keep lowering the cost of prescription drugs and expanding health care for everyone. Not just. Look, we're going to protect our children from getting weapons of war off our streets. That's what we're going to do. The idea that more children die from gunshot wounds in America is so wrong. It's sick. It really is sick. We're going to keep confronting climate change. The most important, we're going to save our democracy. Folks, I've long said we have many obligations as a nation. But I got in trouble years ago for saying I'd make no apologies. We have only one truly sacred obligation: to prepare and equip those we send to war and care for them and their families when they come home and when they don't. That's why I'm so proud to have written and signed the PACT Act. One of the most significant laws ever, helping veterans and their families exposed to toxic materials like burn pits in Agent Orange. I was around during the Vietnam War. It's hard. Nobody was able to prove that there's illness was a consequence of Agent Orange. And no one was able to prove initially that because they lived in burn pits like my son lived next to in Iraq for a year, that is the cause of their illness. But because of the PACT Act, a surviving spouse with 2 children is now eligible for a stipend of about $3,000 a month. And those children who lost a parent are eligible for tuition benefits to go to college and to get job training. It's already helping over 1 million veterans and their families just so far. Well, I love them, and I'm so proud of my son's service. We get it, but guess who doesn't get it and doesn't respect our veterans? We know from his own chief of staff, the 4-star General John Kelly, that Trump, when in Europe, would not go to the grave sites in France. The brave service members who gave their lives to this country, he called them suckers and losers. Who in the hell does he think he is? Who does he think he is? There's no words for a person. They are not the words of a person not worthy of being commander-in-chief, period. Not then, not now, and not ever. I mean that. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Just as no commander-in-chief should ever bow down to a dictator, the way Trump bows down to Putin. I never have, and I promise you, Kamala Harris will never do it. Will never bow down. When Trump left office, Europe and NATO was in tatters. Not a joke. America First doctrine changed our whole image in the world. Well, they gave the hours, about 190 hours sum total, than my counterparts or heads of state in Europe, to strengthen NATO. We did. We united Europe like it hadn't been united for years, adding Finland and Sweden to NATO. 10 days before he died, Henry Kissinger called and said, not since Napoleon has Europe not looked over their shoulder at Russia with dread, until now. Until now. Well, guess what? Putin thought he'd take Kyiv in 3 days. 3 years later, Ukraine is still free. Donald Trump calls America a failing nation. No, I'm serious. But think about this. Think about this. He publicly says to the whole world, I'm going to say something outrageous. I know more foreign leaders by their first names and know them well than anybody alive. Just because I'm so damn old. But I'm not joking. Think of the message he sends around the world when he talks about America being a failing nation. He says we're losing. He's the loser. He's dead wrong. Many of you are very successful people who travel the world. Name me a country in the world that doesn't think we're the leading nation in the world. Without America, not a joke, think about it. I'm being literal. Who could lead the world other than the United States of America? Well, guess what? America's winning, and the world's better off for it. America's more prosperous, and Americans are safer today than under Donald Trump. Trump continues to lie about crime in America, like everything else. Guess what? On his watch, the murder rate went up 30%, the biggest increase in history. Meanwhile, we made the largest investment, Kamala and I, in public safety ever. Now, the murder rate is falling faster than any time in history. Violent crime has dropped to the lowest level in more than 50 years. And crime will keep coming down. when we put a prosecutor in the Oval Office instead of a convicted felon. And folks, the distinguished senator from the C Senate from California and I passed the first ban on assault weapons. And guess what? It worked. If we care about public safety, we need to prevent gun violence. And what makes me ashamed when I travel the world, which I do, more children in America are killed by a gunshot than any other cause in the United States. More die from a bullet than cancer, accidents, or anything else in the United States of America. My God. That's why Kamala and I are proud. We beat the NRA when we passed the first major bipartisan gun safety law in 30 years. I'm serious. That comes from here. And now it's time to ban assault weapons again. And demand universal background checks. That's in stark contrast to my predecessor. When he was in office, he enacted a $2 trillion tax cut. $2 trillion tax cut that overwhelmingly benefited the very wealthy, the biggest corporations, and drove up federal deficit every single year of his presidency. He left office with the largest annual deficit in American history, $3 trillion. And by the way, I made a commitment when I got elected, and my vice president made a similar commitment. No one making under $400,000 will see a single penny in their taxes raised, not a single penny. Neighbor that I come from in Claymont, Delaware, and Scranton, Pennsylvania, they say, well, that's too damn much. But the point is to make sure that we know this isn't an attack on the wealthy. He left us with a pandemic raging, an economy reeling. His allies in Congress, with all due respect, I've had this conversation with your Senator Ron Johnson, voted against every one of the things I talked about today. Every single thing I talked about in terms of rural economy. He voted against it. Voted against it. It's hard to imagine your senator voting against interest in a rural state was so large and so consequential as the state of Wisconsin. Meanwhile, your other senator, Tammy Baldwin, has done everything to take care of the state so she can be devoted to it. Vice President Kamala Harris fought like hell for all of you and for the future worthy of your aspirations. Look, just think about how far we've come. We have more to go. We have more to go. Too many people are still in trouble. But nearly 4 years that we've been president and vice president, with one of the most extraordinary periods of progress in American history. COVID no longer controls our lives. We've gone from an economic crisis to the strongest economy in the world. Let me say it again. We have the strongest economy in the world, and no one challenged it. We got more to do. We're seeing something else. In thousands of cities and towns across the country and across Wisconsin, we're seeing the great American comeback story. The way I see it, and the other team talks about how bad off we are and how America's the way I see it, today's announcement is about far more than just giving rural America the power to turn on the lights. It's about giving the power to shape our own future. In fact, Wisconsin has a strong, strong history of neighbor helping neighbor and forming cooperatives, which are literally owned and powered by the people of Wisconsin. Because of you, we're planting seeds today that grow and blossom for generations to come. That's what we're seeing here in Wisconsin, a state with a proud tradition of rural communities leading our nation forward. And again, that's not an exaggeration. You've been a leader in the nation. We invested $4 billion so far in 350 projects to modernize Wisconsin transportation. Just in Wisconsin, that's been invested. Infrastructure, including 3 roundabouts on Route 14, US 14, and a new bridge on County Highway M. Folks, look, Just like we're making the most significant investment in rural electrification as FDR, we're also making the most significant investment ever in affordable, high-speed internet. Because affordable, high-speed internet is just as essential today as electricity was a century ago. In order to be able to do business, and when things are shut down, the kid doesn't have to sit outside of McDonald's. And anyway, that's why we've invested $1.6 billion just in Wisconsin to connect everyone to affordable high-speed internet in Wisconsin. And since I took office, 72,000 more Wisconsin homes and small businesses have access to high-speed internet for the first time ever. We're going to keep it going. We've also invested $200 million to replace lead pipes across the state so a kid can drink clean water without worrying about brain damage, and changing their schools as well. We've launched the Rural Partners Network, putting new federal staff on the ground to help communities access federal resources. Let them know what they are, where to go, how to get it, because it's complicated. So I want people on site being able to tell people how they qualify, how they apply, how they get it done. And after years of importing 90% of our semiconductor chips, which I might add, America invented, we invented the computer chip. It's needed for everything from automobile engines to weapons. We passed the Chips and Science Act, has led private companies from around the world to come back. We used to have 40% of the market not too many years ago. And now we've got down to basically zero. So around from countries around, I travel from everywhere from North Korea, anyway, South Korea to across the world to get these computer chip factories to come. I asked when we convinced one of the companies in South Korea to invest in building these chips in America, I said, why would you do it? And they're investing several $billion. He said, because you have the most advanced workers in the world, and it's the safest place in the world to invest. Well, our Chips and Science Act has led private companies from around the world to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in new chips and battery factories, and more of them right here in America. With the leadership of your governor, you've already added 200,000 new jobs and attracted over $5 billion in Wisconsin in private sector investment in clean energy and advanced manufacturing. In fact, this spring, I was with your governor in Racine, where Microsoft announced a $3 billion investment, $3 billion investment to build a data center to help operate one of the most powerful artificial intelligence systems in the entire world. It's going to create thousands of good-paying jobs on site and across the state, creating even more opportunities in rural communities. Let's remember, my predecessor promised you that he would redevelop Foxconn factory in Racine. You been there lately? He didn't do a damn thing. Nothing. Folks, all these investments means family farms can stay in the family. Rural entrepreneurs can build their dreams. Your children and grandchildren won't have to leave home to make a living. I don't know how many of you have been confronted growing up where everything's going well and the son or daughter comes to mom or dad and said, I can't stay. There's not work for me here. I got to leave. That's stopping now. Because we're spreading opportunities to benefit everyone. Building a future where no one is left behind. Growing an economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down. Because when you do that, everybody does well. Everybody does well. Let me close with this. In 2020, I said one of the reasons I was running was to rebuild the backbone of America, the middle class. Nearly 4 years later, we've done just that. In thousands of cities and towns across the country, we're seeing the great American comeback story. My predecessor believes America is a failing nation. He's a failing president, a failing man. He's wrong. America isn't failing, we're winning. We are the indispensable nation in the world. We're the nation of dreamers and doers. that led to the greatest advances in human history over the last 200 years. That's who we are. But my predecessor doesn't get it. He refused to visit an American cemetery in France that I was just near because, according to his own chief of staff, a four-star Marine general, Trump said those servicemen buried there are suckers and losers. My son died because of a year in Iraq. I'm just happy, and I mean this in front of my heart. I'm glad I wasn't there. I think I would have done something. No, I think you would have too. They're heroes. He's the sucker. He's the loser, the way he talks. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to get emotional about that, but But I miss him. He was the Attorney General of the state of Delaware and volunteered to go. Anyway, our servicemen and veterans are heroes. And you, the American worker, are heroes in this comeback story. You're the reason for the comeback story. Because of you, all those who came before, we're the only nation that's always emerged. Every single time, check it out. Always emerged in American history. We've always come out of a crisis stronger than we went in. Stronger than we went in. Because of you, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart, I've never been more optimistic about America's future. We just have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America. There's nothing beyond our capacity when we work together, when we fight. I'm now going to go over and sign that good jobs executive order and keep it going, guys. You're saving the country. God bless you all. God bless America. And just last year, we added 250 new energy jobs. Clean energy jobs, growing twice as fast as any other sector of the economy. Clean energy. I know the other team doesn't think there's any such thing as global warming. Well, I like to put the other nominee for president, the former president, I'd like to put him in the middle of Arizona for a while. Clean energy workers are joining unions at the highest level in history, double any other portion of the workforce. I've said it before. When I think climate, I think jobs, good paying union jobs. I tried for years. One of the first things I did when I became president was protecting the pensions of 1 million union workers and retirees when I signed the Butch-Lewis Act. Butch-Lewis. So far, over 62,000 workers and retirees across Michigan are benefiting from that signing.
Yes, I am.
Before we acted, workers face cuts in their pension. Now they're not only restoring the full amount of their pensions, but they're getting back pay as well. Where I come from, my family, we're making them whole again. It's a big deal, but let's be clear. Every Democrat in the Michigan delegation voted to protect those pensions, led by Debbie and others. But hear me now. Every single Republican in your delegation voted against protecting those pensions. Every single one. No, I'm serious. Not a joke. Every one. I've been around a long time in politics. It used to be Democrats and Republicans. We'd argue like hell, but we'd work out compromises. But every one. Vice President Harris had to cast a tie-breaking vote in the United States Senate to make this pension bill real. Folks, I've been talking about it a while, but we followed up with another big deal, as Barack used to kid me about. I call it Investing in America agenda. It's a simple proposition. That includes our law, rebuilding America's infrastructure, fixing, as your governor said, the damn roads. My predecessor, who's seeking office again, promised Infrastructure Week every week in the 4 years he was president. And he never built a damn thing. Not one thing. Not a joke. Not one. Well, Kamala and I have made sure Michigan receives so far, $10 billion, $900 million for 2,000 projects so far. Roads, bridges, removing lead pipes from homes and schools, clean drinking water, delivering affordable high-speed internet to every Michigander. And the number's still growing. We're just getting started. That bill I got passed and said that Biden couldn't do it, guess what? $1.3 trillion over 10 years. And we reduced the budget at the same time. And guess what? With your support, I signed an executive order to make sure that the largest federal construction projects that are being built in America are built with project labor agreements. You all know what that is. But for folks at home who don't know what a project labor agreement is, the contractor, the subcontractor, the unions put in place the conditions for the construction before it begins. And these agreements make sure construction is top-notch, on time, on task, and on budget. It's a big deal. I want to take a moment to say something like so many Americans like Karine, as he pointed out, a proud Haitian American, community that's under attack in our country right now. Simply wrong. There's no place in America. This has to stop what he's doing. It has to stop. Now, thank you all for being here in this historic day. Today, we recognize that this nation would not exist, and this is literal, without the blood, sweat, and tears, without the determination, dreams, and contributions of Black Americans. That's a fact. This place wouldn't exist. It's a fitting event during this fantastic Congressional Black Caucus Week. All the members of the Black Caucus that are here today, stand up. I want to see you all. Come on. They're the best. I wanted to host this lunch for a few reasons. First, to show my personal gratitude. Well, look, we have to be honest about the forces we face. We gather together in a year when we commemorate two of our nation's most historic achievements. The 70th anniversary of Brown versus the Board of Education that segregated our public schools. It laid the groundwork for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and outlawed discrimination in employment and public places, in which we've just observed its 60th anniversary. Instrumental in both achievements was Thurgood Marshall, an alum of Lincoln University and Howard Law School. By the way, Lincoln's closer to Wilmington than it is to Philly. I've been there many times. And generations of HBU educators and students who came before. It opens the doors of hope and opportunity for a generation of Black Americans and for the entire United States of America. It really does. But today, affirmative action and the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion are under attack like not long since I started as a young civil rights guy. Books are being banned. History is being erased. HBCUs have received bomb threats. And right now, lies and hate are being spread about Haitian Americans in Ohio. It's wrong. It's simply wrong. And it must stop. There are those who want a country for some of us, but not for all of us. But I've always believed that the promise of America, and I mean it sincerely, is big enough for everyone to succeed. No, I really mean it, everyone. And there's been no more important voice for that truth in the black community and our HBCUs. That's what I see in your students. Future doctors and researchers, curing cancer, artists shaping our culture, fearless journalists and intellectuals challenging convention, preachers and advocates inspiring us all. You prove that black history is American history. It is American history. And black excellence is American excellence. American households came out of the crisis, American households, with stronger balance sheets, higher incomes, greater wealth. And all that progress is a remarkable testament to the resilience and determination of the American people. They're the one, determination of American workers, of American entrepreneurs like all of you, of American business, is in stark contrast to my predecessor's record. His failure in handling the pandemic led to hundreds of thousands of Americans dying because of COVID. Remember, just inject a little dye, you'll be okay? His failure to lead the economic crisis that followed, that create millions of Americans, caused them to lose their jobs. In fact, the last month of his failed term was the last month our economy lost jobs. On my watch, the economy has created jobs every single month for nearly 4 years. Because of you. My predecessor enacted a $2 trillion tax cut, which made overwhelmingly benefited the very wealthy and the biggest corporations. Made you feel good, I'm sure. But guess what? We don't have to hurt corporations. We don't have to. I come from the corporate state of the world. For 36 years, I represented a state, Tom and I, that have more corporations incorporated in Delaware than every other nation in the United States of America, every other state in the nation, the entire nation, in the state of Delaware. But what do his policies do? Increase the federal deficit significantly, more than any other previous presidential term. And the federal deficit went up every single year of his presidency and left office with the largest annual deficit in American history, $3 trillion. And now, he not only would give another $5 trillion tax cut for the very wealthy and the biggest corporations, he wants a new sales tax on imported goods, food, gasoline, clothing, and more. As most of you know, such policies would cost the average American family nearly $4,000 a year. And he and his allies say they support workers in the middle class. Give me a break. On my watch, we created over 700,000 manufacturing jobs. He lost 170,000 manufacturing jobs in 4 years. On our watch, factory construction is at a record high. It increased 210%. On the other team's watch, factory construction barely increased 2%. On my watch, the trade deficit with China declined to its lowest level in a decade. On his watch, the trade deficit with China soared. On my watch, we're seeing a record stock market and record 401ks. The bottom line is, I'm a capitalist. I wish I had more stock. But I believe capitalism is the greatest force to grow the economy for everybody. I really mean it. Now, don't point to the fact that for 36 years, as Tom would point out to you, when they did the income of all the members of Congress, I was listed as the poorest man in Congress. I never thought I was poor. I had a decent salary as a senator. But we face a fundamental choice. For the past 40 years, too many leaders have sworn by an economic theory that has not worked very well at all, trickle-down economics. Cut taxes for the very wealthy, and they deserve having taxes cut. But cut for the very wealthy and hope the benefits trickle down. Well, guess what? Not a whole lot trickled down to my dad's kitchen table. It's clear, especially under my predecessor, that trickle-down economics failed. And he's promising again trickle-down economics. But it will fail again. In fact, President Clinton pointed out that since the end of the Cold War in '89, America has created about 51 million jobs. Of those 51 million jobs in that period, the economy under Democratic presidents created 50 million, in fact, 50 million of those. And the economy under Republican presidents created 1 million of those new jobs. Folks, I've laid out a better choice, in my view, to grow the economy from the middle out and the bottom up. I promised to be a president of all Americans, whether they voted for me or not. And I kept that promise, making a lot of Democrats very angry because studies show that the laws I signed actually deliver more benefits to red states than the blue states. That's a fact. More went to Republican states than the Democratic states. It may not have been good politics, but I believe it's good for the country. And I kept my promise. Today, we're better positioned than any nation in the world to truly win the economic competition of the 21st century, in my view.
Mr. President and Governor Cooper, Donald Trump has accused both of you of ignoring the disaster.
He is lying. Let me get this straight. He's lying. And the governor told him he was lying. The governor told him he was lying. I've spoken to the governor, spending time with him, and he told me he's lying. I don't know why he does this. And the reason I get so angry about it, I don't care about what he says about me, but I care what he communicates to the people that are in need. He implies that we're not doing everything possible. We are. And you spoke to the governor, I assume you heard the Republican governor of Georgia talk about that he was on the phone with me more than once. So that's simply not true, and it's irresponsible. I don't know what the governor wants to say about it. Let me tell you what I say. But now I want to be clear about something. For the last few weeks, there's been a reckless, irresponsible, and relentless promotion of disinformation and outright lies that are disturbing people. It's undermining confidence in the incredible rescue and recovery work that has already been taken and will continue to be taken. And it's harmful to those who need help the most. There is simply no place for this to happen. Former President Trump has led the onslaught of lies. Assertions have been made that property is being confiscated. That's simply not true. They're saying people impacted by these storms will receive $750 in cash and no more. That's simply not true. They're saying the money is needed for this crisis is being diverted to migrants. What a ridiculous thing to say. It's not true. Now the claims are getting even more bizarre. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, a congresswoman of Georgia, is now saying the federal government is literally controlling the weather. We're controlling the weather. It's beyond ridiculous. It's got to stop. In moments like this, there are no red or blue states. There's one United States of America, where neighbors are helping neighbors. Volunteers and first responders are risking everything, including their own lives, to help their fellow Americans. State, local, and federal officials are standing side by side. Let me repeat, no one should make the American people question whether their governments will make sure that this disaster, when it strikes, they'll be there. We will, all of us. And it's in part because I expanded tax credits that save an average of $800 per person per year, reducing health care premiums for millions of working families who have coverage under the Affordable Care Act. These enhancements expire next year, though. And I'm calling on Congress to make the expanded health care tax credits permanent. Trump and his MAGA Republican friends want to cut the Affordable Care Act out completely. You know how many times they've introduced bills over the last 3 years to do that? 51 times. 51 times. Wants to replace the Affordable Care Act. You can't let that happen. Look, he wants to replace it with his, I love this guy. I'm trying to be a very good fellow. I'm not letting my Irish get the best of me. But my predecessor, the distinguished former president, he wants to replace the Affordable Care Act with that's what he refers to, a concept of a plan. I've heard that concept of a plan now for almost 8 years. A concept of a plan. What the hell is a concept of a? He has no concept of anything. No plan. If we don't elect Kamala and he gets elected, Trump can kick up to 45 million people off their health insurance. 45 million. Over 100 million people could lose health care coverage because they have a pre-existing condition. The only reason they could get it is because of the Affordable Care Act. Trump and MAGA Republicans want to eliminate the Inflation Reduction Act, which you're talking about, the big bill, which made all these savings possible, raising prescription drug prices again for millions of Americans. They're stated. They're not, and this guy means what he says. Means what he says. Look, during the last administration, my predecessor exploded the national debt. More than any previous president in a single term, this guy raised the national debt by $2 trillion because of the tax cut to overwhelmingly benefit the very wealthy and the biggest corporations. Now he's saying, if elected, remember what he said now, if elected, he wants another $5 trillion tax cut for the very wealthy. That's the tax cut he wants. He won't just get rid of the Department of Education, which he wants to do, and the Affordable Care Act. He'll get Social Security and Medicare, which he says he wants to do. Hurt hardworking people. I got a better idea. Let's protect Social Security and Medicare. And finally start making the very wealthy pay their fair share to keep these programs on. I mean it. To invest in America and all Americans. It's working. Just look at how far we've come from the crisis we inherited from my predecessor. Example, my American Rescue Plan, which not a single Republican voted for, I might add, although there's conversions, delivering immediate economic relief to those who need it most and got us through the pandemic. The bipartisan infrastructure law is one of the most significant laws ever written to modernize our roads, our bridges, our ports, our airports, help replace every poisonous lead pipe in America, and bring affordable high-speed internet to every household. My predecessor promised Infrastructure Week every week for 4 years, but he never built a damn thing. My Chips and Science Act, also bringing semiconductor and advanced manufacturing back home where it belongs, where it started. And through the Inflation Reduction Act, we made the largest investment ever in history to fight climate change and accelerate clean energy, which is the way my predecessor said, by the way, he'd repeal it if elected. Folks, a lot at stake here. We're all investing in the American agenda, and because of what we did, remember how we were going to go into depression and all that stuff? Guess what? We got the strongest economy in the world, the whole damn world. And in America, our Invest in America agenda has already attracted $1 trillion in private sector investment. $1 trillion in clean energy, high-tech factories, and so much more.